Is Jesus really God? Or was his divinity a creation by the church? And what was Jesus' relationship with Mary Magdalene? Could they have married and had a child? Has a patriarchal church suppressed the truth about Mary and Jesus? Well, these are the sensational storylines in Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code. But it does present a unique opportunity for us to explore the fact and fiction about Christianity.
What happened? Are you all right?
I slipped.
Where did you find this? It's all right, little one. Come on, let's see if we can't get you cleaned up. I'll run you a bath.
Have you ever wanted to turn the clock back and imagine what life was like 2,000 years ago in the days of Jesus? Well, with the help of scientific evidence such as written records, artwork, archaeological field testing, this village has been reconstructed to appear as it was in the days of Jesus 2,000 years ago. The word history literally means his story. History is written by taking often conflicting voices and trying to find a common thread. But there's always going to be a subjective element there.
With any historical account, there will always be writers such as Dan Brown, who raise questions about what really happened and pose alternative theories.
I'm just packing up the house. Is there anything that you want me to bring you from home? Bible. Do you even own a Bible? Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll find it.
And this is where it all begins, the Louvre Museum in Paris. Now, the central character is Robert Langdon. Now, he's an expert in religious symbols at Harvard University. Langdon is called in to help solve the murder of a museum curator who leaves behind cryptic clues. Now, Langdon and the museum curator's granddaughter, Sophie Norveux, then go on to uncover a conspiracy set up by the church to hide the truth that Jesus and Mary had a child whose descendants are alive and well today and connected to French royalty. Now that forms the fundamental fictional part of the story, but with so much fact and fiction blended together in this novel, people are asking the question, can it affect Christianity?
The novel is not at all historically accurate, especially for the early church, and that's what makes it quite problematic.
Are these things really true? I mean, are these theories that are laid out there really possible? Because what the book is exploiting is really a black hole in people's knowledge.
And as a historian of early Christianity, I thought it would be important for people to understand that most of the historical claims in the Da Vinci Code, in fact, are part of the fiction.
Underlying assumptions of the culture are increasingly less Christian and to some degree anti-Christian, and so there needs to be a response and a corrective to a lot of the false statements that have been made.
How has a work of fiction caused such an intense reaction among so many? Well, like many authors, Dan Brown has used historical locations, events, and conjecture to piece together the landscape of his story. Much of the controversy stems from a carefully worded statement in the preface to the book.
All descriptions of artwork, architecture, documents, and secret rituals in this novel are accurate.
Are we just being taken for a ride? Or is this a literary device, part of the fiction of the novel itself? Or are we to read it as a claim that indeed the book is accurate and therefore true? The central storyline, that Jesus and Mary were married and had a child, is a well-worn conspiracy theory that has been used by authors over the years. An example of this is the bestseller entitled Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Michael Bagent and Richard Lee, who, by the way, took Brown to court because they said he breached copyright in stealing their central story.
The problem is that this theory was largely discredited, even before Dan Brown used it.
In Brown's book, the only ones who knew the truth about Mary Magdalene and Jesus were a secret society called the Priory of Sion. He tells us about it in the introduction for the Da Vinci Code.
The Priory of Sion, a European secret society founded in 1909, is a real organisation. In 1975, Paris's Bibliothèque Nationale discovered parchments known as Les Dossiers Secrets, identifying numerous members of the Priory of Sion, including Sir Isaac Newton, Botticelli, Victor Hugo, and Leonardo da Vinci.
The Priory of Zion is a modern myth. We don't have any reason to think that this organization ever existed, perhaps prior to some kind of club being formed in the 20th century.
The document secret belonging to the Priory of Sion is held here at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Unfortunately, those documents were proved to be a hoax even before Dan Brown wrote his book.
If we were in North Carolina right now, we'd call this snake oil. And if you believe that these documents are actually providing genealogical records of Jesus, then you've bought snake oil. And what I mean by that is that it's a clear, modern fabrication of documents that were then put into French archives, planted into French archives, with the appearance of age, for the sake of creating a rationale that bolsters the theory that there were these descendants of Jesus. These so-called documents showed up at a particularly peculiar point in time, linked to one particular person who wanted to see himself as a descendant of Jesus and a claim to a European throne and all of this sort of stuff. Now, this person, unfortunately, was not well, and his claims were not in any way demonstrable on the basis of sound historical evidence.
So if the documents that the book has been based on have been discredited, where does that leave the other facts in the book?
A quick fact-checking tour reveals a host of inaccuracies, both minor and major. For instance, there's errors in the physical descriptions of the Louvre, such as the number of panes of glass and the location of the car park. His description of the location of key buildings, such as the American Embassy and the Place de Concorde, doesn't match with the real places. The zero longitude line here at the Church Saint-Sulpice was never known as the Rose Line, as stated in the Da Vinci Code. Brown mentions a real organisation, the Opus Dei. But once again, the facts are not right. It's a Catholic institution for lay people and diocesan priests, not a monastic order. Members of Opus Dei do not wear robes, take vows, sleep on straw mats, or engage in strange sexual rituals, as mentioned in the Da Vinci Code.
What you see in the book is all wrong. For example, Opus Dei has no monks. It's comprised mainly of lay people, of ordinary mums and dads. The whole focus on corporal mortification in the book is totally misleading and falsified. It's not a core message of Opus Dei.
In England, the Research Institute in Systematic Theology does actually exist, right here at the University of London, King's College. However, if you ask to peruse the extensive theological database which has been mentioned in the book, you'll be told it simply doesn't exist.
Sir Isaac Newton's tomb lies at Westminster Abbey, England's most sacred, symbolic, famous church. Remember that the link to Isaac Newton comes from the fraudulent documents planted in the Bibliothèque Nationale in France.
Westminster Abbey management described Dan Brown's novel as theoretically unsound and refused access to the makers of the big blockbuster, the Da Vinci Code, despite large sums of money being offered. In an effort to avoid confusion, for those interested in the life and times of Sir Isaac Newton, a fact sheet's been posted here, pointing out the factual errors in the Da Vinci Code. And here at Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, Dan Brown's characters discover clues that point to Mary Magdalene as the Holy Grail.
The Da Vinci Code at one point claims that Mary Magdalene's tomb has been preserved for the elite few who know the key to discovering it, and that there one will discover thousands of documents from throughout the history of Christianity that would undermine it completely, to which any sober historian who has done any research will say, again, that this is utterly fictitious, no such tomb exists, no such documents exist. Dan Brown just made it up.
So you've never been told?
No, well, it was always this kind of unspoken thing with Mum, not to ask her.
She didn't tell you anything?
No, but she was really open with me about everything else.
Are you curious?
I used to be, but then I only really knew half of myself. And after a while I decided I didn't want to know what that other half was. And I guess I became scared of knowing. So I'm a quarter Irish, a quarter Welsh, and half, I don't know.
By his claim in the preface to the book that the artwork, the documents, and the events are accurate, Dan Brown has blurred the line between that which is fact and that which is fiction. Inevitably, the scholars have checked the facts and found many of them wanting. The book has inspired an entire counter-industry of scholarly publications, films, videos, and websites, and they're all trying to find out what is the truth.
In making this claim, at least on American national television, he was asked if he were writing nonfiction if he would change anything, and he said he wouldn't change a thing. And it was at that point that I decided to write my book, because I felt like that is such a distortion of the record that the record really needed to be set straight.
It's identified here as being a novel, and it's got as much connection with reality as any other novel.
The novel is not factually accurate, and it's interesting to me that now on his website he's made a bit of a retraction about that fact page and making clear that that's part of the fiction of the novel itself.
This is the quote from Dan Brown's website in his frequently asked questions.
Doesn't the novel's fact page claim that every single word in this novel is historical fact?
If you read the fact page, you will see it clearly states that the documents, rituals, organisations, artwork and architecture in the novel all exist. The fact page makes no statement whatsoever about any of the ancient theories discussed by fictional characters. Interpreting those ideas is left to the reader.
It was deceptive from the start. It was deliberately deceptive from the start.
No matter how you may feel about the book and its historical contents, one thing's for sure. The Da Vinci Code's got people talking. And what better time to examine the key issues that relate to Christianity with so many readers eager to talk about the questions raised by the book.
Later in this series, we'll examine the creation of the Bible, who created the Bible and when. We'll also examine other evidence such as the Gnostic Gospels and the Dead Sea Scrolls.
So is there historical and archaeological evidence that suggests that Jesus really lived and that he was a prominent preacher of the day? Later, we'll examine whether Jesus was a mere mortal or whether his divinity was well established before the Council of Nicaea 350 years later, which debated the issue. And we'll examine the historical and archaeological evidence that supports the fact that the disciples certainly believed in his divinity while he was on the earth.
We'll examine some of the evidence from the Bible and other sources about Mary Magdalene and her relationship with Jesus as a devout follower. This is also an opportunity to explore the role of women in the church.
In the future, we'll examine the Bible's own codes and prophecies. The messianic prophecy of Daniel, which outlines the coming of Jesus. We'll examine the Bible's own prophecies and predictions for the future.
Paint from work.
Oh. Look, your mum's not having such a good day today. She's really struggling to breathe, but she's been asking after you, though.
Obviously, the Da Vinci Code has its strengths, but why has the book been so successful? Is it because it taps into the disillusionment with the church in modern society? Are people searching for answers?
People have become disenchanted with traditional answers about Jesus, about the church, and they're very ready to believe that some of the truth about this has been suppressed. And so when you sort of combine those things into a thriller and, news secrets are being revealed and there's evidence of suppression of the truth about Jesus, well, and then you throw in a Mrs. Jesus as well, you've got a sort of compelling gumbo that many people in Western culture will be prepared to consume.
The Da Vinci Code taps into certain concerns, particularly that Christians have, about the role of women in the early church, about Jesus and humanity, about what the churches may have covered up in terms of ancient history. So a lot of questions that we've had and a lot of concerns that we've had, the Da Vinci Code purports to answer.
The Da Vinci Code, of course, is a real page-turner. It's sort of like a glorified TV movie where you just have to tune into the next episode because it's so exciting. And it sweeps the reader along because it has just enough information to sort of wow them. But when you really look closely at any of the fields that it addresses, you find out that there's just enough misinformation there to know that it's not really trustworthy.
Dan Brown can write a good story, but hey, that's all it is. It's not a major cultural phenomenon. It's not history. Quite a number of the things Dan Brown thinks are true aren't true. It's just a story. It's a great read. Recommend it for a long airline flight.
It's detailed fiction. The general broad brush would be that, of course, there were societies and there were Knights Templars and there were Knights this and Knights that and Knights the other thing. But, I mean, you can't tell a story by just stringing together bits of historical data. You'll have to, what do you call it, fluff it up.
Before we leave Dan Brown's novel, let's examine the writer's intentions behind the book. After all, Dan Brown himself is a Christian. This quote comes from his website.
Is this book anti-Christian?
No, this book is not anti-anything. It's a novel. I wrote this story in an effort to explore certain aspects of Christian history that interest me. The vast majority of devout Christians understand this fact and consider the Da Vinci Code an entertaining story that promotes spiritual discussion and debate.
With all this criticism, I have to say in favor of this novel that it ignited a curiosity among the public that was never there before. People want to know now about the Dead Sea Scrolls. They want to know now about Jesus. There's higher than ever curiosity to this subject, and so my tours about Christian archaeology are popular more than ever.
And if you want to enjoy it as a novel, that's fair enough, but understand that the underlying religious, theological, historical claims are extremely weak and actually often false in this novel, and you should read the novel in that light.
There's a series of mistakes about historical issues in the Da Vinci Code. I don't think that undermines its value as a very interesting murder mystery. But people need to understand that when they're reading a murder mystery, that's not the place to go when they want to learn about history. If they want to learn about history, they should read historians.
Please note in which part of the bookstore you purchased the book. Fiction.
But if people in the church understand what the history is, they don't have any reason to be nervous. And if they understand what that history is, they actually can engage in a very positive discussion and dialogue about who Jesus really is and what the history really is.
You know, they say there is no bad publicity. And the fact that the Da Vinci Code, even though we may disagree with its conclusions, has raised the awareness of people to talk about these issues may have very positive results.
One of the issues raised by writers such as Dan Brown is how to keep religion relevant in today's changing world. And although some people may not agree with how Dan Brown has raised these issues, one thing's for certain: he has broadened the debate about Christianity, the Bible, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, and the prophecies that create the basis for the Christian code.
Knowing the difference between fiction and reality is very important for anyone trying to work out the truth about Jesus Christ and his life and teachings as recorded in the Bible. The Da Vinci Code has opened up the debate and springboards us into a discussion of the truths that are central to Christianity.
I want to know.